Unit 2 of Module 3 discusses gender analysis tools available for humanitarian response. There are a variety of methods and tools to conduct gender analysis. Gender analysis tools have also evolved along with the progression of the conceptual understanding of gender issues that were discussed in Module 1. The Harvard Analytical Framework, also called the Gender Roles Framework or Gender Analysis Framework, is one of the earliest gender analysis tools that capture gender issues in development, with the women in development perspective. This was developed by the Harvard Institute for International Development in collaboration with USAID, aiming to help planners to design more efficient projects and improve overall productivity. In this analytical framework, there are 4 components organized in a matrix and can be adapted to many situations. The 4 components are 1. Activity of profile, 2. Access and control profile, 3. Influencing factors, and 4. Project cycle analysis. The framework also contains a series of checklists consisting of key questions to ask at each stage of the project cycle, such as project identification, design, implementation, and evaluation. This framework helps to gain an understanding of the main criteria and questions related to conducting a gender analysis and application of its results for planning and monitoring purposes. Please see the detailed note on the Harvard Gender Analysis Framework provided as an additional resource for this module. There is a quick guide to gender analysis developed by Oxfam in Great Britain in 2014. This guide outlines what information a good gender analysis will provide. The purpose of conducting a gender analysis is to identify the specific aspects of gender relations and inequalities that are present in your program context, and to examine their implications for program design and implementation. A gender analysis should explore the following areas: the differences in the lives of men and women, the barriers that unequal gender relations present to women's development, the status of women and their ability to exercise their human rights, the different skills, capacities, and aspirations of women and men, and finally, the division of labor, men's and women's different activities and their access to and control of resources. Guidance for gender analysis, more specific for humanitarian situations, is provided in the Interagency Standing Committee, or the IASC in short, Gender Handbook for Humanitarian Action. The previous frameworks are valid and applicable for conducting a gender analysis in an overall development context for different scenarios. The Rapid Gender Analysis tool is specifically geared for conducting gender analysis during an emergency response. It contains a simple 4-step process that can be used throughout the humanitarian program cycle and can be adapted for different sectors. This tool also provides the possibility of enhancing the analysis as more information becomes available. Also, the Rapid Gender Analysis tool can easily be incorporated into existing assessment tools. It strengthens the accuracy and comprehensiveness of findings and recommendations. Let's look at the steps. Step 1 is to find gender information that is already available. How do we do this? We start by gathering information about the gender context before the crisis and to develop an overview of gender relations and coping strategies of women, girls, men, and boys. What are the key informations to look for in Step 1? There is a list of key information provided, such as demographic profile of the population disaggregated by sex and age before the crisis. This is the status before a crisis has set in. Gender-based roles, responsibilities, information on changes since the onset of the crisis, relationship dynamics amongst women, girls, men, and boys, socioeconomic conditions for women, girls, men, and boys before the crisis, legal framework that define their rights pre-crisis or before the crisis, opportunities and access to education, employment, livelihoods, etc., decision-making at the household and community levels, what are the changes due to the crisis. We must also look at protection issues and risks faced by different groups of women, girls, men, and boys before the crisis and during the crisis, the legal frameworks for gender and protection needs and access to justice as well. Sex and age disaggregated information about the needs, capacities, and preference of the affected community should be looked at, as well as the coping capacities of women, girls, men, and boys from different backgrounds. So, Step 1 asks to look at the status and gender relations before a crisis has set in and what the changes are as a result of the crisis happened or happening to gender relations in a particular situation or scenario.
Where to find this information? Several sources can be useful for this type of information. They include the census data, demographic and health surveys, gender analysis reports, humanitarian assessment reports, protection and gender-based violence sector reports, as well as gender country profiles, such as those produced by various organizations like UN Women, development partners like Oxfam, Food and Agriculture Organization, and CARE International. Gender country profiles are made, produced, published, and made available as public information every few years. So these are secondary sources to access. You can look at box 1 for a set of key questions, what to look for in step 1. The step 2 of the process is to collect gender information since the crisis began or related to the program if it's not a crisis situation. This information is primary information, which is not already available. So what are the activities? Start by reviewing the information found in step 1 to assess what has changed regarding the demographic profile, roles, structure, protection risks, and sex and age disaggregated data available since the crisis began. This data should be collected by different actors who are engaged in the crisis, or if it's a program, in the program planning and implementation. The second activity is to identify knowledge gaps about the impact of the crisis or program on women, girls, men, and boys. The third step is to plan, organize, and conduct data collection with everyone affected by the crisis and/or if it's a program, then everyone engaged in the program. What kind of information to look for? Sex and age disaggregated information available about the needs, capacities, and preferences of the affected community or targeted community of a program. Changes in demographic profile of the affected population or the targeted population by the program. Any changes in the opportunities and access, such as access to education, employment, livelihoods, health services, legal rights, as well as ownership or control of productive assets. Any changes in the role of women, girls, men, and boys since the onset of the crisis or the program began. What are the new roles for women, girls, men, and boys, and how do they interact? How much time do these roles require? This is in relation to the previous set of information. What structure is the community using to make decisions now? Who participates in decision-making spaces? What are the protection and gender-based violence risks facing women, girls, men, and boys? How do legal frameworks affect gender and protection needs? And finally, what are the needs, capacities, and preferences of women, girls, men, and boys in the affected population and/or the program? Please pay attention. It's not only the needs, but the capacities and preferences also to look at. How to find this information? This is primary information collected on-site using participatory assessment methods to ensure consultation with women, girls, men, and boys who concern the crisis situation or the program target group.
Surveys, interviews, community discussions, focus group discussions, transect walks, and storytelling. These are all different types of participatory assessment methods which can be used to obtain information. Some resources for participatory assessment methods are the Interagency Standing Committee Reference Group on Gender and Humanitarian Action Guideline on the Gender Handbook for Humanitarian Action dated 2018. Section C of the guideline titled Sectoral Analysis on page 93 provides guidance on collecting information from participatory methods. Box 2 also provides a set of key questions, what to look for in Step 2.
Moving on to Step 3. Having now data collected from secondary sources in Step 1 and primary sources in Step 2, we can move to analyze the collected information. The analysis of the information can either be done immediately after Step 1 or after Step 2, depending on the urgency of the situation, the context, and also the amount of information that you were able to generate. Gender analysis in emergencies focuses on the impacts of crisis on women, girls, men, and boys. It compares the state of gender issues prior to the crisis with how gender issues have changed since the initiation of the crisis. The analysis considers aspects of gender, age, and diversity to understand the different dimensions of how affected people experience and cope with the crisis. What to do in analyzing the data? There are 6 key steps provided here by the IASC guideline. The first activity is to list the distinct capacities, needs, and preferences of women, girls, men, and boys. Identify the changes since the crisis. List the roles and responsibilities for women, girls, men, and boys. Identify the workload distribution, whether it's paid or unpaid. It's useful to separate these two categories. How does the distribution impact their respective rights and opportunities, and identify whether needs of men and women are met equitably? Note the dynamics between women, girls, men, and boys. How do women and men help or hinder each other in meeting their needs and fulfilling their rights? Who perpetuates violence against whom? What roles do institutions and the community play in meeting needs and rights, as well as in addressing and preventing violence? Having completed the analysis, we come to the step 4. In this step, based on the analysis, recommended future design or action planning. Use the analysis under each of the key criteria explored in steps 1 to 3 to derive conclusions and recommendations specific to the context. Ensure recommendations are considered in preparing the action plans, in allocating resources, and operationalizing the action plans. Having done this, we still need to continue to generate sex and age disaggregated data to further strengthen the analysis and recommendations throughout all phases. Based on the experience of conducting a gender analysis in emergency response situations, a set of common challenges have been identified. The IASC Guideline 2018, which proposes this rapid gender analysis tool, lists 5 main challenges and offers solutions to overcome these problems. The first challenge is crisis imminent. Circulate a brief gender overview with the sector leads and decision makers when you know there's an imminent crisis in a particular location. Use secondary data. Develop a brief gender overview and share with the sector leaders and decision makers. The overview should be part of the humanitarian actors' contingency plan. This will raise their awareness on gender issues. The second challenge could be when time is limited for field work. Step 2 proposes collecting information through primary participatory analysis methods.
With the rapid onset of a crisis, action planning, as we are aware, is time-sensitive.
Ensure to undertake key informant interviews with some women community leaders, teachers, and health workers, and any other key female figures to understand more about sensitive issues that are unlikely to be raised in a group setting by men. This helps to get an understanding of the gender-based relations and most important issues. The guide questions provided in the steps 1 and 2 help to have these key informant interviews with women leaders. The third challenge is not possible to separate the community. If it's not possible to undertake separate focus groups by age and sex, use a community mapping tool instead, and make sure to speak with individual women to hear the specific issues they want to raise. The fourth challenge is no women on the assessment team. In this situation, the recommendation is to engage a female community leader to accompany a male assessor and therefore increase the chances of reaching at-risk women. When there is a woman in the team, the women in the crisis situation or in the community will feel more comfortable to come forward with the issues of concern. The fifth challenging area could be that there is no field access. In this situation, speak with the local gender specialists about their views on the crisis. Meet with displaced people from that area. And if it's a situation where there is no access, consider conducting phone interviews. Thank you for watching this video on gender analysis tools for humanitarian response, and we hope to see you soon.